What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of RNT Fitness Radio. This afternoon, Akash and I were lucky enough to have Dave Tate afford us an hour of his time. Now, for those of you that have been following strength training for a period of time, you'll know that Dave is an absolute legend within this sport. He's been involved in it for decades, runs EliteFTS.com. So when I say this, I mean it. It was genuinely, an honor almost to have an hour of his time and to be able to pick his brains. We covered everything from what keeps him motivated right now that he's given up competitive powerlifting is kind of what gets him psyched up to be able to still go to the gym and have that drive. And his answer is quite interesting. We also talk about the difference, sort of the shift in mindset of going from good to great at something at the higher levels. He then gives Akash and I some direct business advice that we can take away and apply right away with RNT Fitness. So if any of you listening to this run your own fitness businesses at all, I think you'll definitely discover a few gems in this podcast. And for those of you that perhaps don't even run your own fitness business, but you just want to further enhance your knowledge of training, sort of the whys behind it, slightly more advanced methods of training, I would really, really urge you to check out EliteFTS.com and also give Dave a follow on Instagram, which is at Under the Bar. He's got a ton of experience. He's got a great sense of humor, a very knowledgeable guy. So this was a really cool one to record. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and let you guys get straight into it. I hope you enjoy. And as always, please hit subscribe or feedback to us with your thoughts, questions, suggestions. We're open to it. So for anyone listening in right now, obviously you're the other side of the pond. Give us a quick overview on who Dave Tate is.
That's a good one. Business owner, father, husband, meathead. Keep it.
I like it. So why did you start training and why do you continue to train pretty much 40 years later? And can you describe to us what you mean by the void when you write about that?
I started training when I was, started doing, and that was just because I was getting the shit beat out of me all the time and sucked at sports. So uncle bought me a weight set, which I used for a couple months. And then from there, my father enrolled me or joined me or whatever you want to call it into a gym, a private gym, which was a powerlifting gym at this time. And a lot of that was, I think more in part because one of the owners of it was the chief of narcotics.
Sorry, can you just repeat that quickly, Dave? Sorry.
The gym owned by police officers.
Okay.
So I think that was one of the reasons why my father pushed me that way, into that gym, which ended up being a powerlifting gym. And that was at that point in my life, I could have went one or two different directions. So that kind of helped being around a lot of cops that I wouldn't continue to keep going down the direction I was going down. And within 3 months, maybe 4 months, I entered my first powerlifting competition and fell in love with the sport then. I did my first meet when I was 13 and continued to compete from, I think, 1983 was my first meet all the way to 2005. Wow. And became a large part of my identity. Now, after competing, just regular training still a huge priority in my life. But throughout that whole time I was competing, I would say it was my number one priority above everything else by far. It was like powerlifting and then ... and then the second priority.
Yeah.
When the void, when I speak about that in a powerlifting sense, if you're lifting a max weight, there's a certain point in time where I have to backtrack on this a little bit. If you're lifting a max weight and you don't have to focus on anything, everything's going to be everything's going to just be automatic. you've trained your mind and your technique and everything just to be able to kind of zone out and everything. You go into a zone state, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
For me, from the time period I'd hit the chalk box until after the lift was done, on a lot of my max lifts, I don't remember what happened from point A to point B.
Right.
But I know I was conscious enough to be able to think and make adjustments while I was straining. But for the most part, I'm not there. So it's like freedom from everything. Now, after I retired from powerlifting, that was an aspect that I missed, that was really hard to replace. So I found it doing stupid shit. Like, you got a leg press set up and you think you're going to be able to do 10 or 12. Well, see if you can do 30.
Mm-hmm.
Push yourself to something that you really don't know. So you got to put your mind in a different place to be able to do that. And then while you're doing that, in the process of doing that, you're in a darkness, you're in a blank. I mean, it's just a dead space. It's a zone space. Maybe you do it, maybe you don't do it. From a training standpoint, it's awful. It's awful because there's zero return on the investment when you do something like that, as far as moving you forward, as far as strength or even hypertrophy and everything else.
Yeah.
But for me, so I have to put that out there, because a bunch of fucking idiots will go and start trying to do this every day with every set and every exercise. And you can train to failure, but what I'm talking about is when you're training so far past failure, you're almost, as a lifter, training in a competitive mindset instead of a training mindset. And you can't recover well from that. It's gonna knock the shit out of you. But from a mental standpoint, that's something I need in my life to be able to keep things on track. Or maybe I'm just a meathead, or maybe I'm just fucked up.
So you're doing this for a sick psychological kick, as opposed to actually trying to elicit any real physical benefit.
Well, there is no real physical benefit. I mean, it's stupid. I mean, I have to admit that from a training standpoint, I would never ever program something like this into somebody's training unless they're an excuse, unless they're a complete puss and they don't know how to, push themselves past what they feel they're capable of doing. Because we're all capable of doing a lot more than what we think we are. Yeah. But there's always that balance, because there's a difference between it's called it's the strength deficit. It's the difference between your true absolute strength and the strength that you display. And the closer you get to that true absolute strength or above, what your body can actually do, the bigger pounding it's going to take on you. And recovery is still the biggest aspect of training. So I would never put it in there, unless somebody needs a kick in the ass. Or it's almost another way to look at it. If anybody's played sports, you've always had a coach that had you do just stupid shit that made you end up puking. Yeah. 140-yard dashes or 100 up downs. It's got no physical benefit past the first several, but mentally they'll say it's going to make you mentally tougher.
Yeah.
I don't buy that theory, but to me, I love being in that state where you're pushing yourself so freaking hard that everything else just kind of goes black, and it's just a void state. That's why I can't avoid it with it. The only way I can explain it is to say it's a void state.
Would you say it's your version of therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. What was the last? Give us an example of your last time you took yourself into the void. These challenge sets. What's the most recent mess up? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, last week I was doing max effort work, and I still do my Westside type protocol, even though I'm doing all this functional bullshit. But and it was, it was a single, so it was programmed to be a single because I don't like max effort reps to be anything over a single. And for some stupid reason, after I chalked up, I thought, how many can I fucking do? So then it ended up being 6 or 5 or, I don't remember, but it was definitely more than one. And I posted it on my Instagram. It's the one where I yelled, fuck you at the very end.
Oh, yes, I saw this. Yeah.
So that would have been the last time. And that's a mental thing, and it's stupid as fuck because when I look back on it, I want to delete it because it's like not only was it dumb as fuck, but I'm going to go on my very last rep and sit down and scream, fuck you, and blow out all my air, lose my brace, lose my tightness, and then try to stand back up. It's funny as hell to watch, there's no doubt about that, but it's not smart. But I felt, I went home that night. I felt great. Woke up the next day. I wasn't too beat up about it. And now I know what my expectations were, what I thought I could do were too low. Because if I thought, whatever that weight was, be it 600, 650, I don't even pay attention to that anymore. Whatever that was, it was definitely under what I was capable of doing, especially if I did it for 6.
Yeah.
So I need to increase my standard a little bit to be able to move that.
Interesting. So obviously you've stayed with powerlifting throughout most of your career, but you've been around bodybuilders as well, like John Meadows and guys like that. What kept you true to your powerlifting roots? Was it the gym that you started at that your dad got you involved in, and was it born there and just kind of remained?
I powerlifted through high school, but then when I went to college, it became hard for me to find a group of powerlifters to train with. So I ventured off and did a couple of years of bodybuilding and did several shows. And I actually probably liked that style of training for most of my life more so than the powerlifting style of training, because I like that training to failure, doing strip sets, and I like the things that you can do with submaximal weights on accessories, because it challenges. It goes back to that void thing, but maybe not so not so deeply. You can challenge yourself more. Where in powerlifting, there's so little room for error that. And I'm not going to say bodybuilding's easy by any stretch of the imagination, because it's probably more of a commitment because of the diet. But there's a lot of room for error you can make in the training and still kind of grow muscle. When it comes to powerlifting and strength training, there's so little room for error that you have to justify every set, every rep, every exercise. And if you can't justify it, you can't do it, because it's just going to make it hard to recover from. And you have to recover to be able to get stronger, which meant for a large part, there was always other stuff I wanted to do, but it was detrimental to be able to do. So when I did the bodybuilding, I loved that aspect of the training, but I hated the aspect that the real heavy compound stuff I had to pull out, because it was too exhausting for me able to do, heavy sets of squats and then still go on and do 15, 20 sets of leg work. But what it came down to is, after doing a few shows and getting to the point where I actually was successful and wasn't placing dead last. And I didn't like the first show. I hated it. I liked the training, but I hated the competitive aspect. So the guys I was training with were telling me it was because you sucked. You placed last. Obviously you're not going to like it if you suck at it. And so I dieted harder, and, this process went on until I did well in a show, and it still sucked. I will die with the memory of standing on stage, winning and looking out and seeing, a bunch of people in boat neck sweatshirts staring at me in my underwear and thinking to myself, this is nothing like standing up with a 700-pound squat.
Yeah.
It's so that I was supposed to continue, and that was a pre-show for the Ohio. I was supposed to continue dieting for another 4 weeks and then do the Ohio. That night I got back to my room and went to the grocery store and probably ate 10,000 calories of cookies and all kinds of shit. And my training partner came to pick me up the next morning and saw all the food and pizza and shit laying all over the floor. Kind of realized I was done. I then explained to him that I'll train with him for the show. But then after that, I got to go back to my roots. I need to go back and do what, what I love doing. And he actually came back and did a couple meets and did really, really well. But then he went back into bodybuilding. But I tried, I gave it my best shot. I probably had better genetics for that sport than I did for powerlifting, to be honest. But it just wasn't in my mind. It wasn't in my DNA.
Yeah.
And then after I retired, you run into, when you do something from the time period of 12 years old until I don't even know how old I was. So like you said, 83 to 2005. So 25 years or whatever it was. It's your number one priority. It's your identity.
Mm-hmm.
So when I could no longer do it, I'm running into identity crisis because I was like, I didn't even want to train. It's like, what's the point of even going in the gym if I'm not training for a meet? It's just, it would seem so pointless that I didn't know how to exercise. I didn't know how to work out for health. I still don't think I give a fuck about exercise or working out for health. And that's where Justin Harris came in. And then it was John Berardi was first, and he got me a little lean. But that wasn't really getting any leaner than I was through the majority of my powerlifting career. There's a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of them probably created because of myself. I only spent maybe 5 years in the 308 class. Before I came to Westside, I went and compete over 242. So I had abs from, all the way until 83 till 92,
mm-hmm.
And that's eating lean, actually probably too lean for a power lifter, chicken, rice, old school low fat dieting, which was pretty much what everybody was doing because I had to stay within that weight class. It wasn't. And then when I got to Louis, he was telling me I needed to be 308. I was telling him to get fucked. There was no way I was going to be that fat, and so I tried to do it clean, and I got up to 60, 270, right around that range. But then just the caloric intake was just so fucking high. You can only eat so much chicken, rice, beef, potatoes, sweet potatoes, all the other kind of stuff. And then that's when basically I had to break code and find other ways to get the calories in there.
I remember reading some of these articles.
Is this the one where you poured a bottle of olive oil on the pizza and eat it at night?
Yeah. So that was, that was what I had to do. But that wasn't where some of the misconception falls is everybody thinks I was eating like shit before that. That was going from eating probably way too clean to just jumping ship and saying, hey, look, this is going to be the fastest way to do it. I don't have to worry really about controlling my nutritional, my micronutrients, because on 10,000 calories a day, you're pretty much going to take care of any fucking vitamins or minerals you're going to need.
You've got that covered.
Yeah, I mean, everything's fortified anyhow. So that was all covered. And that led to, now I knew I had to take some of the weight off. And I was starting to have, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and all the other kind of stuff because of the diet and probably more so the body weight than it was so much the diet. And, but it's all interrelated. Anybody who's in the field that knows what they're talking about, nothing stands in isolation. So you can't point and just say this is 100% diet. If I was walking or doing even some type of steady state cardio, it probably wouldn't have been as bad. But Berardi helped, bring that all down. But then when I started to get lean, somewhat lean again, is when I started thinking, okay, I wanted to know how these pro bodybuilders who are already at the top of their game just to turn pro, how the fuck did they put on 15 pounds of lean body mass in the first year that they turned pro? That was a question that's always baffled me because I knew it couldn't be drugs because the drugs are already in there to begin with.
Yeah,
it's like, what the fuck? And it's not money because they don't make money. So if it's not drugs and it's not money, what the fuck? How does this happen? And it happens. It doesn't happen as much now as what it used to be. But like you see somebody turn pro, they win the nationals, and then like 8 months later, you'd see them be like, "What the fuck?" And I mean, just for a normal person to put 5 to 10 pounds of pure muscle, lean a year, that's like almost impossible to do. You can gain 20 pounds a year, but to put on 10 pounds of lean body mass, that's a task.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know. So when I met Justin Harris, that was the first question, like, Justin, because he was working with pros at the time, how in the fuck is this being done? And he said, I'll show you. So we went through the protocol, and that's probably when I got my leanest, and it was, I never want to go through it again, and it's it's more diet related than what I thought it was. He used the carb cycling approach, but it's basically, to wrap that answer up, you have to be able to commit 24 hours a day of your life just to that, and fuck everything else. There's no other way around it. You know, are there drugs involved? Yes. Is there diet involved? Yes. Is there training involved? Yes. But does everything have to be on point consistently all the time? Unless you're genetic freak, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's what happens is when people turn pro, they realize now I need to get on a stage against the best of the best. And so everything becomes more locked in. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I'm not vain. I like the way I looked when I was working with Justin, but there's no way in hell I am going to live my life like that. So then after that, working into, you know, the training now, it's just been kind of fiddling around with trying to figure out, you know, I like John's high volume approach because of what we spoke about before, the challenge sets and the training. But what I didn't like about it was there wasn't any real max effort work in there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I have joint disease. So I've had both hips replaced and arthritis everywhere. Again, can I say that's because of the training? Yes. Can I say it's because of the body weight? Yes. Can I say it's because of, you know, poor nutrition for those years? Yes. But I also need to point out, you know, both parents have had hips replaced, shoulders replaced. So there's a genetic component as well, which probably it still would have happened to me, but 10 years later.
Yeah, it's just kind of sped the process up.
Yes. And being that it's been both hips, I would say body weight was probably the biggest contributor, because since I've weighed over 250 since high school, every step you take, you know, is pounding on the joint. So even the max effort method has its place when you're as fucked up as what I am, because when you're standing or holding max loads, you got that neural and you got the internal and external stimulation, central nervous system stimulation, you know, of building the supportive tissues around the joint. Now that doesn't mean work up to, you know, a super maximal weight. It means you can work up to a sub-maximal weight at just a slower tempo to receive that same max effort type of stimulus, which when I'm doing max effort type training, my joints feel better. When I do max effort type training at an accelerated tempo, in other words, purposely applying 100% maximal force, which really is true max training, I got to be really careful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got to make sure everything's dialed in. But I missed that aspect when I was doing John's stuff, because it has no point in bodybuilding. You know, it has a point for, you know, joint stabilization done correctly. And I missed the dynamic work as well, which does have a point for hypertrophy training. But given the choice of doing a dynamic effort method or some type of repetition method item for bodybuilding, the dynamic stuff is thrown out the window.
Yeah.
You know, everything's going to have a justifiable purpose. So now it's kind of combining all that stuff together in a way that's enjoyable, you know, that I like to be able to do, and moving forward with that and learning and experimenting, because I still do help people. I don't coach people per se, but I do help a lot of lifters, and they're usually the higher level lifters. And it's more just as an advisor, I don't charge them anything, but I like those difficult problems.
Yeah.
You know, you get an advanced lifter that their squat's stuck and they don't know what's going on with it. And it kind of takes a little bit of a deep dive, or sometimes it's just purely obvious. For me, that I like, because that's where you can see really freaky gains. Is you take somebody that's already really strong and maybe they got something just a little whacked in their technique, and they fix that a little bit. Then they put 40 pounds on their squat. You know, and the funny thing is they think it's what you did, and they forget that it was the 3 years that they were stuck beforehand,
mm-hmm.
kind of building the base that allowed that strength base to be there to make that correction in the first place. But that part I love, you know, I still stay connected with that, and I still train and try different things just to be able to see what kind of impact it will have.
Do you think John's training, like psychology aside, do you think John's training lends itself to guys in your position that have already accrued the strength and a shit ton of muscle and is now great at kind of like retaining it? But for a beginner, do you think strength should be the primary focus? Like, do you see what I mean? Where I'm getting at with that?
I do, but anybody listening to this needs to understand that each and every one of us is going to come from our own bias. And my bias is, a kid coming into the strength sport at 12 years old as a power lifter. So I really have no other answer but to say, yes, strength is going to be the most important. Mm-hmm. Even when I look outside my bias, there's still bias. Because, if you're going to be using a repetition method to build biceps, what's going to build bigger biceps, an 80-pound barbell or a 60-pound barbell? Now, we can talk about tempo day and night, but let's keep all variables the same and say tempo is the same, all contraction, all that's the same. The stronger one's always going to be the bigger one, all things being equal. Just as so as, if you're a rugby player, all things being equal, which is never the case, by the way. But let's, for argument's sake, all things being equal, the stronger person always wins. Definitely. So I look at it from the bias of, we can control that. We can control the strength variable. We can train for that. Now, is there a point to where you can be too strong for your sport, including bodybuilding? I do believe that's true. Mm-hmm. That there can become a point where a rugby player or a bodybuilder crosses a threshold to where they're actually they're strong enough. At that point, they need to back off and focus on the weak point training or the skill development if it's a sport outside of a strength sport, and bring that up. Whereas, for a rugby player, is there really going to be a difference between a 650 squat and an 800-pound squat? All things being equal, yes. But if the 800-pound squatter has shitty technique on the field or can't lateral step, he's getting his ass kicked by a 400-pound squatter.
Yeah.
So I do think that strength is, every beginner that starts lifting weights needs to become very technically proficient at barbell type movements. And everybody agrees with this across the world.
Yeah.
Bench presses, overhead presses, squats, barbell rows, deadlifts, all these things need to be technically efficient. All right. And when you strive for the technical efficiency, you're going to get stronger. When they just start grabbing bars and heaving them around, that's where I have the problem. That's where if it's a young kid and they're grabbing bars and they're heaving it around and it looks like shit, and no matter what, you can't get them. And this would be online. So somebody are sending me videos and it just looks like shit. And they're trying to build muscle, and every barbell row they send me just looks like shit. I'm going to force them to do dumbbell rows, or I'm going to force them to get on a machine so they can at least develop the stabilizers and develop what they do have without reinforcing shitty row technique, because I can't fix it. If I'm not there physically and you're trying and you can't fix it, then I'll pull them off to something else. So there's always variables. With any question I've ever asked, I always want to answer with it depends.
Yeah.
Because that's everybody's individual.
Definitely. So you mentioned a second ago that obviously you're helping a lot of people out still. You've coached people and now you're helping people out as on the side. You've been around a lot of elite athletes, working with and around them. What's the big mindset shift that has somebody going from good to great? What common traits do you see amongst those that kind of separate them?
Genetics. Let's take genetics out of the equation.
Yeah.
Because genetics can take somebody from shit to great with very little effort, very little work. I think now everybody admits that. Nobody denies that. Now, longevity of them, that's where training can become a factor. But separating that out to be able to go from good to great is what separates it is being able to separate your ego from the activity and to list, sports, you get to this really weird level where you can get really strong. You can get, say, an elite total in powerlifting. And what I've seen happen is people get to a certain point, and then it really becomes more a matter of them not really getting any stronger, but displaying the strength they already have. So let's say they're strong enough to display, they're strong enough, physically strong enough. And if we could test them in other capacities to say what their absolute max would be, they're strong enough to do a 2,000 pound total, but their best is 1750, right? Mm-hmm. But the strength is there for the 2,000. The difference between the 1750 and the 2,000 is knowing when to pull back, not so much knowing when to push harder. Okay. Because they're already really good. So work ethic isn't the problem. The problem is knowing when to pull back. All right. So that's where ego comes into play. So if they know they need to squat 680 for a triple on said day, and they spend all day thinking about 680 for a triple, and then they get to the gym and they start warming up, and it's just not quite right. They're going to force that 680 for a triple. Where what they should do is just settle for the 660 and back it down, or just shut it down entirely and skip that week and bring it up the next time. So that's being smart, about your training, being audible ready about your training, and putting your ego aside, you're training for the meat. You're not training for today's Instagram video. You're training for that long-term thing. So I love the filming aspect. I love all that, but I think that, a lot of these guys they're filming too much and not internalizing enough. So they're filming the video, and this is no slap on Instagram. That's a whole nother rant in itself, but they're filming everything. All right. So they film, they go look, they film, they go look, they film, they go look. At what point in time are they trying to feel what things are supposed to feel like? And I don't want to see a camera replace that, because when you're on the platform and that bar shifts a little bit the wrong way and you start straining, you have to have the ability to think when you strain, and react, so if you're pulling a deadlift and it starts to slow down, you have to be able to think, okay, are my knees in the right position? Do I need to push my ass forward? What the fuck am I supposed to do? Do I grip the bar? Do I turn my feet out? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do that a seasoned lifter is going to know, but they have to be able to sense, okay, now this hips, boom. And coaches will cue things, but by the time a coach will cue, if I'm going to cue, if you're pulling in, you need to push your ass in, and that's what's causing the problem. By the time I cue that, it leaves my mouth, hits your ears, and processes in your brain, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Where as soon as you hit it, if you can think that's what has to happen, then it's a successful lift. Now what's happening is now we don't even have that cue from my mouth to your ears to your brain. It's you filming something, doing the lift, walking over, looking at the lift. So we're going from a verbal cue that's just a second delay to a 3-minute delay, for you to look to see what's actually going on. So and sometimes that's to the detriment. At other times, it really helps because they can spot check and really see where the video, where the technique is really off.
Yeah.
Or send it to somebody else to kind of analyze it. Mm-hmm. But the focus can't be on that. And it's more or less, one of the training partners is saying, hey, snap this. And then, completely forgetting about it entirely. So it's a secondary emphasis. It's not the main emphasis of making sure the frame's right and my veins are popping out and all that stuff. They're kind of bullshit.
So the other thing, another tool in the toolbox.
Yes, it has to be a tool. It has to not be the box.
So be like a bodybuilder, just relying on body weight rather than actually forgetting what they look like in the mirror.
Yes. Now I like your tool in the toolbox analogy, because when it is a tool in the toolbox and you're going to pull what tool needs to be used when it needs to be used. For a lot of people, it's become the actual box. And then all the tools in the toolbox are the different filters, the different things that they can do with that. And those become their tools in the toolbox. And that's okay. It's if they want to be, If they want to build a larger following and that's what their thing is, then they're not really competitive lifters. And most of them aren't competitive lifters. Then that's fine. Those should be their tools in their toolbox, whatever the fuck that is. Those aren't the people I'm actually helping, though. The people I'm helping, they send me videos. I'm like, this shit from the front does nothing for me. I need to see the bar. I need to see the squat from the side. I need to see the deadlift from the side. The best angle for Instagram is the worst angle to coach from.
Yeah.
So and now to fall back on the second ability, it's the ability to listen. Because when you become a really good lifter, you've paid your dues. Anyhow, they don't listen, so they have to be able to listen. And they don't listen because they think that they know it all, because they've paid their dues and they have under the bar experience. So just because you have under the bar experience, you may get some of the best advice that's going to help you go from that that area of being good to the area of being great by somebody who doesn't even look like they lift weights.
Yeah.
It could be from a physical therapist, it could be from a doctor, it could be from a nutritionist. And there's so many different things that feed into this that it's ridiculous. And if you're not willing to listen, then you're not going to hear that message when it comes in, and it's going to throw you. You're never going to get there. So lack of ego and the ability to listen will take somebody from good to great.
Do you think they need to put their life on hold in order to get to great? Do you think it needs to become a complete number one priority?
My answer to that would be yes, but it can still be done without, I've known very few great lifters or great bodybuilders that had a balanced life.
Yeah.
It's always been slightly out of balance. And I'm not telling people to have an unbalanced life. But what I'm telling them is, if you're striving to have a balanced life and get your ass kicked by somebody who has an unbalanced life, keep your fucking mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point in time, we're all going to have to hang it up if we're competitors. It's just the name of the game. But I think having that total commitment helps. But I will fall back on that and say Louis warned every one of us when I was there. I was there for 14 years, to never let it consume our entire life. And so that was always kind of being pushed at us. So from my perspective, that meant that I still worked on, becoming the best personal trainer I possibly could, continuing education and all the other kind of stuff, and not letting it be. There's still free time in the day. Yeah. I mean, it's not like I'm a power lifter, which is going to take up 8 hours a week. And then the rest of the time, all you have to do is sit around and practice diaphragmatic breathing and visualize. You can still educate yourself, get work done. You can still work. I've known people that have been world champions doing, hard labor jobs. There's you can still live, but your focus is what I'm talking about. A lot of people will mistake that and say, this is my number one priority, so fuck it. I'm not going to date anybody. I'm not going to work. I'm going to try to live on some government welfare and just this. That's all unnecessary. You can still live a normal life and build for a future for when it is over. You're actually stupid if you don't try to build for a future when it's all over, because you'll wake up at 40 years old or 45 or 35 and find everybody around you is now 10 years ahead of you. So you're not just going to be able to jump into a real career life. You're going to jump into a real career life 10 years behind.
So speaking of setting yourself up and work and a career and whatnot, you've been in business for over 20 years now. Mm-hmm. What commonalities do you see with businesses that stand the test of time, such as yours, especially in the fitness industry? What's made Elite FTS stand out?
A lot of things. I've had a lot of good people around me, and a part of the company since day one. I'm not smart enough to be able to do all this. We've never had 2 times growth. We've never had rapid growth, which I don't know if that's good or bad, because I'm still waiting for that, that year that you're supposed to double revenue. I've never had that. It's always just been very, very slow growth. But I think that increases your longevity because it's easier to manage risk. It's easier to manage cash. It's easier to manage all those other things. Giving, I think, is very misunderstood in the industry. And I think that's probably the catalyst and the biggest reason why we're still around. The site started as a Q&A with just me answering questions. And we have over 1 million pages of educational content on the site with no free or no paid aspect. The only paid aspect are ebooks, and those are marginal. I mean, we never had huge ebook sales, but all the education is given away for free. And where this comes into play is I can go into a whole speech about why I feel it's important for each generation to give back and to carry on and to pass on from generations prior, but I've done that several times. Yeah. People can look that up and kind of see what that is. But I think that's a big role is, I'm reaping the seeds from people 20 years prior planted, so the seeds that I'm laying today aren't really so much for Elite FTS, but they're for the people that are going to be around 20 years from now. But what happens is when you give, everybody puts a monetary value on everything these days. So they're only going to give so much. Or here, if you give away all your time.
Sorry, Dave, you're cutting out.
Or let's say that we pay. So I'll go back to the seminars. Am I back on?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, you're just saying about giving away. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's where I think it's misunderstood is a lot of people will say that if you give it away, you're devaluing yourself. So if you give it away, you're putting no value on the product. Thus the product is free. So it's devalued. Or if we give the seminar content away that we put on YouTube, then people will just quit signing up for the seminars because why should they when they can watch them on YouTube? So here's where I think things get screwed up is all the talk of the devaluation of or giving things away for free means that the value is 100% in the hands of the person who's receiving the content. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. When you give somebody a gift, how does that make you feel?
Good.
Feel great, yeah.
So is that value 100% in the hands of the receiver, or is it 100% in the hands of the giver?
It's kind of 50-50, I guess.
It's definitely not 100% in the hands of the receiver.
Yeah.
Because I can sit here and make the argument and say, I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours sitting at a conference table with strength coaches, helping them figure out what their own training philosophy is, only to see them 2 to 3 weeks later spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a weight room from our competitor and sit there and say, oh, that's bullshit. That's fucked up. Or I've answered probably 500,000 questions online only to have people go buy their bands from a competitor and sit here and say, that's fucked up. That's bullshit. And I can keep going on and on and on and on, but what that's doing is assuming that the value of that gift is all on the person who's receiving it. If I give you a gift, if I buy you a new pair of shoes, should I really give a shit if you're going to wear those shoes or if you're going to go give them to the Salvation Army or if you're going to go take them and sell them on eBay? Should I really matter? Should that really matter what you do with the gift I give?
No.
Yeah,
it should not.
Yeah.
All right, because that's the positive aspect of giving. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us different than all other creatures, is the ability to give. So when you give, it's like forgiveness, right? forgiveness is a gift you actually give yourself that gives you the permission to let go of all the grief of this adversity that you went through or the person that fucked you over. As soon as you forgive them, that's for you, not for them. Most people understand that. All right. But there's also the caveat, you can forgive but never forget, which means you're not going to repeat the same mistake again.
Exactly.
Okay. Giving is the same way. So when people look at the perceived value or the demonetization or all this other crap that has to do with content, they're forgetting that there is a value to yourself of giving that gift to somebody else.
Interesting.
I like that insight.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Thanks, Dave.
It's similar to what we try and do here. We people always ask us, why is there not a pay for site? And we always say, we appreciate, people before us who gave us so much information, like yourself, and loads of other strength coaches. So we feel it's our duty to be able to educate other people on what we've learned and be able to pass on, which I think is your motto for your company, essentially, right?
Yeah, it's nice that you've just reaffirmed, some reasons as to why we do it. So we've had, I get comments all the time saying, why don't you put a, £5 a month, membership wall on there? I'd sign up to it. And I'm like, no, it just defeats the purpose.
Well, the other thing is they wouldn't. Everybody that says that they would sign up for something or they would pay for it, in the long term, they don't. Now, I do offer a lot of products. We do sell a shit ton of products. So they're out there, but, just because I give somebody an article or I do a podcast or whatever it's going to be, doesn't mean they have to go buy from me.
No.
It's out there for everybody, because on the flip side of this, how many people are buying from me that may have never read an article, may have never listened to a podcast, may have never done it. It all balances out. Life has its way of balancing this kind of shit out. And I like to think that the more somebody gives and helps others, the longer they're going to last and be around, because that is of value just to the earth, and to the planet. So it's not looking at the value of what's the valuation of the company. It's what's the valuation of, the contribution to everybody who's associated with the content that's being received.
So if you could turn back the clock, what would you tell your 25-year-old self? Or even better, what direct business advice could you give Akash and I right now, considering we're in our sort of mid to late 20s?
Stay out of debt. Make sure you're...
I'm in business with an Indian, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah, if you're overseas too, so it makes things a little bit different. If you were here in the States, I'd say make sure everything's legally buttoned up. Build a fortress around your company so people can't penetrate and lawyers can't suck you full of money. Because I've seen that knock a lot of people out, and I've seen how much money it's cost us for stupid shit when it comes to legal fees that I should have known. I should have looked into earlier, but never wanted to spend the money to have any kind of risk analysis done. And just, if you fuck up, admit it. If you screw up, take responsibility and help people. It's really, it's so fucking simple, but so few do it. We all fuck up. I fuck up all the time. If I make a grand mistake or I make a mistake with the company, I'll be the first person to admit it. I'll admit it online. I'll apologize for it. It's to sit there and act like it didn't happen, is wrong. Or if you say something, especially in the political climate of the world today, if you say something, you take a stance one way or another, which you probably really shouldn't do in this world. But if you do, then don't change your stance every fucking time somebody has an argument or somebody sends you a DM saying that's bullshit, and avoid the criticism. Take it with a grain of salt. A lot of criticism that comes in is meaningful, and it can help guide you. If it wasn't for the criticism that I've got, because I've been around a long time, so I have customers and people have been following the site since day one. A lot of these names I recognize. So when I see emails or messages from them and they're pissed about something, or they don't think we should have put this article up, I look into it. I'll do a little bit deeper dive to be able to see and ask, the other criticism that's kind of a waste of time. And if it is criticism that's harsh and long, and needs to be replied to, the first thing I do is to see if they've ever been a customer of ours to begin with.
Yeah.
Because that matters. I mean, don't sit and criticize the company if you've never supported it financially in any way whatsoever.
Definitely.
I don't care how many years you've been reading the site. Don't criticize what we're doing if you've never financially supported it, because it wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people that have financially supported it. So for the most part, I just avoid and don't bother with any of the criticism at all. I do have a rule on Instagram, but it's still kind of a new platform, and the DMs are not fucked up yet. Give it time. It will go the same direction of every other social media where the DMs become a complete mess. I will answer every DM. So even if it's somebody being an asshole, I'll still answer it. Now I may just put so, or the letter K, but I'm still going to answer it.
You're still getting,
I'm still going to reply, but I'm not going to go into a big long explanation. If it's a customer, I'll go into an explanation, but too many times people get wrapped up into, their point of view, if it's on training or diet or nutrition or business or whatever, and it's in the comment section somewhere. And I see this, all the time as I scan through things looking, and all I think is, what a disservice this person's doing. And I do help our team members as well who have online training businesses. So I do help them with advice, and I'll watch and I'll see, here's a dude that just last week there was one that there's an ongoing debate about something. I can't remember what it was, but he had at least 5 or 6 different posts in there. And if I was to add all those up, it's probably 6 paragraphs. Well, that's a fucking article. And he's not going to convince the other party of what he's trying to say. And that's not taking. So let's say he's got 45 minutes of just time typing this crap. Put the emotional bandwidth or the mental bandwidth hours of that day thinking about it. 6 paragraphs of text that could have been an article that he could have wrote that would have been of service to the people he's already training and the people who already care about what he has to say. But instead of that, he chose to use all that time and mental bandwidth to use as a disservice to all the people who actually give a shit.
Yeah.
It's a good point, isn't it?
Yes, that's the point I try to drive home to people. If they're online trying to create a business, if it's consulting or online training or whatever it is, anytime you do something, is this a service or a disservice to the market you're trying to attract?
That's
perfect.
And then you might say, you know what, fuck it. It's not worth my time to even get involved into this, because usually these are the same people that I'll speak to later that will tell me, how do you get so much done? And well, if you're not spending 2 hours a day being a dumbass on fucking, social media threads, that you would have a lot more time.
And speaking of bandwidth, how do you manage your bandwidth? Because I'm guessing you've got tons of responsibilities and different jobs to do in the day. So how do you manage your bandwidth to enhance your creativity and the things that matter in your business and life?
I hire the best people that I can hire, and so a lot of it's delegated. Then I give a lot of responsibility to that. Sometimes I think more responsibility than I should, but it has to be able to free me up to be able to do what I excel at best. And, that's new product creation, and it's the vision, driving the company forward is the main role of my job.
Yeah.
Is what I need to do something every single day that's going to try to help push the company forward or to help educate. So it's usually there's 3 tasks I have every day, maybe 5 at the most, that have to be executed before the end of the day, or it's not a successful day. If those 3 tasks aren't done, then I'm going to recheck myself at the end of the day, re-examine how I'm spending my time, and then to refocus and see if I need to work more on delegation and so forth. I don't spend my time doing things that I don't feel are going to move any of those needles forward. So just say I'm doing the podcast now. I won't blog today. All right. And the reason I won't write a blog today is it's very easy after you guys post this podcast for me to be able to strip it down and then send it off, get it transcribed, and probably be able to pull 3, 4, 5 different blogs, just off specific spots of this podcast, not mentioning reposting the podcast as a blog in itself.
Smart.
So it's actually for trading the time. So for the hour period of time that I would have spent trying to put one blog up, I have a potential to actually have 6 at a later time, plus giving you guys the content, which is going to spread it to a different demographic that I may not otherwise touch. So it's making those type of decisions
for sure
on, that's why I say I've never turned anybody down for a blog, because why would I, unless it can still be regurgitated content. Now, that's not to say that I haven't had a lot of blogs or a lot of podcasts where the same questions get asked, and then I'll go and I'll review, and it's not worth spending the money to get it transcribed because it's just the same crap regurgitated over and over again. But there's still sound bites. There's still other stuff that people can pull from it. So repurposing content, for advice for you guys, or going back to that advice question, advice for me when I was younger is learn how to repurpose content way sooner than I did.
Yeah,
because it's really fucking hard to keep coming up with new content over and over and over.
We're coming up to 1 year in. You're gonna laugh at this, but we're 1 year in of posting pretty much every single day. Solid advice, and we are like, how you can't reinvent the wheel. You get some trainers that sell out and they'll just try and jump onto the latest fad, whereas we're not playing that card. We're trying to stay true to ourselves, and we've given out this information 12 months ago. So as you say, it's I guess our challenge is coming up with repurposing content and keeping it fresh and putting a new spin.
Take one of the questions that you asked, like what would you do differently, and then take one tip from each one of the people for 10 people, and right there you got an hour podcast. Now it's editing work. It's still going to take a little bit of time, but it should be fairly easy to pull, especially if you got show notes, and timestamps on questions. That's pretty fucking easy to do.
Yeah, it's good.
And boom, there you go. That gives you the podcast to do when you guys need to take a week off because you're sick of it. There's a brand new one, and people are like, wow, this is awesome. I got 10 different people, industry experts, whatever you want to call it, giving advice on what they would do differently if they could go back and do it again. I mean, it's just thinking, talking, letting your mind vomit on a table, and then coming up with all the different. There's so many different ways to repurpose shit. It's ridiculous. And the other thing is, you could, if it's been a year, you could take episode number 4, change the images, change the show notes, change the text, post it as new tomorrow, and nobody's going to know that it's not new.
Yeah, it's true. And you're always gaining new followers too, right?
Yes. And nobody's going to go back and listen to every single episode. So it's just changing enough variables. And I don't know podcasting very well, but changing enough variables so it doesn't get tagged as a duplicate, because you don't want to drop your rank. And I don't know that, but usually it's not that many variables you need to change to be able to not get hit as a duplicate. And then it's reposted, and it's actually a really good service to the new people who come on, because they never knew that you interviewed, Louis Simmons or whoever the hell it was, and they think it's awesome.
Great. Perfect. So here's a question that hopefully you haven't been asked before. Where do you see the next shift in the fitness industry going? And could you ever imagine AI automating most of the roles that currently, people are doing for their clients? Can you see it fully going automated?
I don't see fully, but I do see the whole online training thing eventually becoming vapor. And the reason I say that is we're getting really, really close with biofeedback technology.
Sorry, Dave, you just cut off there.
We're close to the weather me now.
So,
Can you hear me now?
just come back on. Yeah,
Just cut off after saying we're getting close to biofeedback technology.
All right. Okay. All right. The wearable technology today is increasing at a very exponential from wearable point at some point in time, to where the big three or big four, Nike, Adidas, the big sportwear companies are going to start implementing it into their sportwear. Now, when they implement that into their sportwear, that technology, all that feedback technology, it's just one step away from creating the program. Creating the program is actually the easiest part if you have all the feedback technology.
Yeah.
How hard the muscle strains, what the force is, what the movement, the GPS. The GPS can tell you if somebody's walking, sitting, laying down, having sex. I mean, GPS can basically tell you anything that you want. So if they have all that information, then to be able to tap it into some type of online training program, it will cover 90% of the population, because of the individual variables can all be programmed for. Right now it's already being done humanly, right? Somebody hires an online coach, and a good one, which is rare, but a good one is going to tailor it to that person's needs.
Yeah.
Well, they're doing that based upon the feedback that they're seeing. Well, the feedback that they're seeing is nothing compared to the feedback that a wearable technology scaled 2 years from now is going to be able to provide. It's not even close. And then it's just a matter of them getting the coaches together and paying them enough to create programs. Boom, there you go. Online training for most people will be non-existent. It will no longer exist. So that will become an automated process. Unless you stay, specialized, individualized. If you build your name, you build your brand. I mean, let's say medicine can replace the role of a doctor, where you go in and talk to a robot. All right, and everything's the same. And percentage-wise, the robot performs better than what the doctor can, just based upon the analytics. If you know your doctor really, really well, and you got a good relationship with them, even if it's going to be a 10% less diagnosis rate, you're still going to go see the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's still human relationships, no matter what they try to automate. But what the next trend is, unfortunately, I've never really paid attention to that. I pay attention to the market. I pay attention to what the market's doing, because that makes a difference to what type of products that we need to bring out. And I pay attention to who our target market is specifically, to be able to know where to go with that. But our target market is basically people who place training as one of their top 4 priorities. So that stays a pretty inelastic market.
Yep.
That group doesn't really change that much. It does change, and it changes just like everything changes. But on the other end of that spectrum is the fitness community as a whole, and that is impacted by trends on a weekly basis. So that could also be why I don't have, a $200 million a year company, because I'm not constantly trying to figure out what those stupid trends are, and just staying with the shit that works.
Staying true to your brand.
Find more stuff, and staying true to. I mean, there's still changes though. Nothing stays the same. The only thing that's true is change, because it will always happen.
Yeah.
And you got to stay on that, because if I was still selling the same products and never deviated from those that I was doing 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in business.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of fluctuates and moves through there. But I think that training is always going to be around. I don't think there's going to be anything in the near future that's going to replace that. And even if there was a pill that could replace health of training, you're still going to have people mentally who are going to want to get out there and do the shit.
Yeah. Perfect. Good.
With the people who have training in their top 5 priorities, how do you make sure that you're directing all your marketing towards them? What are you focusing on there? Is it the type of content or specific ways?
It's the type of content. If you're placing training as one of your top 4 priorities, if you're a coach, it's definitely one of your top 4 priorities. It's your income. All right. If you're an athlete, and you really care about training, then it's going to be one of your top 4 priorities. The best example I can give now is the sport of powerlifting has changed a lot since 2010, where the number of competitors really hasn't increased in the United States at all. But the number of people who say they're powerlifters has gone up tremendously. So let's say there's 15,000 competitive powerlifters. There might be 300,000 people who say they're powerlifters.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before 2010, I could say powerlifters, every powerlifter was part of our target market. Because if they're competing, it's obviously going to be a top priority.
Yeah.
At least in the top 4. But now there's so many, let's say only 15% compete or 10% compete. That bottom 90% really doesn't fit our target market. That's not to say that I don't want to penetrate that market or I don't want to sell goods to that market. It's just saying that we're not going to target all of our articles to how to squat the first time you go into the gym or beginner-based squat programs.
Yeah.
There's a million other places that do that crap, that always have, so, and if we do put an article out that's beginner-based squat training program, it's going to be geared to you to be able to pass it on to the client you're working with.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the content still gets there, but it's the mechanism of how it gets there that matters.
Yeah.
Because that's but a lot of times that end user is purchasing from our market.
Yeah.
So if let's say I get the online coach or I get the personal trainer, and they're buying from us, they got trust in us, they believe in our products. Well, guess every one of their clients, if they need wrist wraps, where are they going to send them?
To you.
The EFTS, yeah. Perfect.
But I'm not going to market to their clients.
You got it. Yeah.
Because they don't fit that typical demographic.
So it's like a chain.
And yes. Bodybuilding.com markets to them.
Yeah.
So that type of content's going through there. At a certain period of time, everybody will start reading, bodybuilding.com and other content, which is kind of along the same lines as that. Then at a certain period of time, they move away from that content. It's like, this is repetitious. It's the same shit. I kind of know this. It's kind of like muscle and fitness used to be. It's like you grow out of muscle and fitness and you start looking towards other resources. And now the cool thing about being online, you can scale up.
Yeah.
So then you scale up to that next level. And then there's levels up from the content that we put out, but typically you're going to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
You guys put out one content piece a day, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Dave, I see we're coming up to just cropped over the hour mark here, so I'm aware of your time. So let's just finish on 3 rapid fire questions.
Yep.
So back in the day when you were under Justin Harris's tutelage, if you were grinding really hard on a diet, what would have been your go-to cheat meal? Back in those depths, Starburst.
or cereal. I mean, sugar. It was always sugar.
Perfect. Favorite drink? I see you're drinking a sugar-free Monster there, but...
yeah, this probably the sugar-free Monster.
Yeah.
I can't drink 10 of them a day, obviously, but...
Alcoholic drink?
No, I don't drink alcohol.
You don't drink? Okay.
No.
Last question. Who should we have on our podcast next?
Have you had Meadows on?
No.
Meadows would be one. God, there's so many people. Ben Pollock. Ben Pollock would be really interesting for your podcast because he's got a lot of different.
Sorry, how are you spelling the surname there? Pollock. Pollock.
Hello? Sorry, Dave, you just cut off again.
A lot of different avenues you can go down with him.
Mm-hmm. We'll give that a go. We'll have a hunt for him.
So Ben Pollock and John Meadows.
I think it's an A. He's one of our team members. So am I here? Is it back? Are we good?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we go.
Okay. What Ben Pollock's got he's got a blog on our page. So just go to the blogs, go to coaching blogs, and you'll be able to find the correct spelling of his name there. I think it's an ACK, but you'll also be able to see some of his content and some of the stuff that he puts out. But he's got great stuff when it comes. to the sociology of the sport, which I think is what he's working on his PhD in.
Oh, interesting.
Psychology aspects. And he's probably right now, as far as people that I can reach out to very, very fast, he knows more history of the sport of bodybuilding and powerlifting, just strength sports, than anybody I know right now.
Great. Yeah, he'd be ideal then. Perfect. So, Dave, where can people find you? You, the business, everything.
EliteFTS.com. On Instagram, I'm at Under the Bar. And I would say that's pretty much, those two are good enough.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time today, Dave. We both really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Perfect. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.